The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Tom Wilson's apartment as he stared at his computer screen. Another email from his boss demanded immediate attention to quarterly reports that were already keeping him up at night. Tom rubbed his tired eyes and glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m., and he was already dreading the day ahead. At 45, this wasn't how he had pictured his life. 20 years in the financial industry had given Tom everything he thought he wanted: a comfortable apartment in the city, a decent salary, and respect from his colleagues. But lately he felt something missing. The constant pressure, endless meetings, and political games were slowly crushing his spirit. Each morning he found it harder to put on his tie and step into the elevator that would take him to the 37th floor of a glass building where he'd spend another 12 hours glued to. Spreadsheets, is this really all there is? Tom whispered to himself as he sipped his coffee, bitter and cold after sitting forgotten while he answered urgent emails. His thoughts drifted to his grandfather's small farm where he'd spent summers as a boy. He remembered the feeling of dirt between his fingers, the satisfaction of watching plants grow, and the peaceful quiet of country mornings. No traffic sounds, no phone notifications, no pressure, just the natural rhythm of life. Tom clicked away from his email and opened a new tab. He'd been doing this more often lately, browsing real estate listings in rural areas, daydreaming about a different life. Usually he'd look for a few minutes, sigh, close the tab, and get back to work. But today was different. A listing caught his eye. Historic farmhouse with 30 acres, price to sell. The photographs showed a weathered 2-story farmhouse with a wide front porch, surrounded by fields and woods. According to the description, the property was located in a small town in Vermont, about 3 hours from the city. The price was surprisingly low, almost suspiciously so. Tom scrolled through more pictures. A barn that needed some work, old fencing around what used to be a pasture, and views of rolling hills that seemed to stretch forever. Something tugged at his heart. Before he could talk himself out of it, he picked up his phone and called the listed real estate agent. "Hello, this is Diane from Country Life Realty," a cheerful voice answered. "Hi, I'm calling about the farmhouse listing in Millfield," Tom said, surprised by the excitement in his own voice. "Oh yes, the Wheeler property. It's a special place with great potential," Diane replied. "It's being sold through an estate sale. The owner passed away about 8 months ago, and his son lives out west and just wants to get rid of it. That's why the price is so attractive." Tom asked dozens of questions about the property, and Diane answered each one patiently. The house needed work, she admitted. The plumbing was old, the electrical would need updating, and the roof might need repairs soon. But the structure was sound. The land was fertile and the location was ideal. Far enough from the city for peace, but close enough to civilization for convenience. "How long has it been empty?" Tom asked. "Well, officially since Mr. Wheeler passed away last year, but honestly, he was in a nursing home for a few years before that. The property hasn't been actively farmed in quite some time." Something about this felt right to Tom. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just his midlife crisis talking, but he heard himself saying, "I'd like to see it." "Can we arrange a viewing this weekend?" The following Saturday, Tom drove his city car along country roads following Diane's directions. As the landscape changed from suburbs to farmland, he felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. By the time he turned onto the gravel road leading to the Wheeler farm, he was smiling, something he hadn't done genuinely in months. The property looked rougher in person than in the photographs. Weeds had overtaken what once must have been a lovely garden. The white paint on the house was peeling, showing weathered wood underneath. The barn leaned slightly to one side, but instead of disappointment, Tom felt a strange sense of possibility. "Sorry about the condition," Diane said as they walked through the overgrown yard. "The family hasn't had anyone maintaining it." "It's perfect," Tom replied, surprising himself again. Inside, the house was dusty but charming. Wide plank floors, a stone fireplace, and large windows that let in streams of natural light. The kitchen had outdated appliances from the 1980s, but it was spacious with a large farmhouse sink and plenty of cabinets. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms offered more space than Tom had in his entire apartment. "What's the catch?" Tom asked as they stood on the front porch after the tour. "Why is it priced so low?" Diane hesitated before answering. "Well, it's remote, needs work, and has been on the market for almost 6 months. The son just wants it sold. He never got along with his father and has no interest in keeping the property." Tom nodded. looking out at the fields. He could picture them planted with vegetables, maybe some fruit trees along the edges. The old barn could be fixed up, perhaps for a few animals. Chickens, at least, maybe a couple of goats. The house would need work, but nothing that couldn't be done over time. "I'll take it," he said suddenly. Diane looked surprised. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe get an inspection?" "I've been thinking about this my whole life without realizing it," Tom replied. "And yes, I'll get an inspection. But unless there's a major structural issue, I want this place." Back in the city, Tom's friends thought he'd lost his mind. "You're giving up your career to become a farmer?" his colleague Paul asked during lunch. "You don't know the first thing about farming." "I can learn," Tom said simply. His boss was equally baffled when Tom gave his notice. "This is career suicide, Wilson. If you're unhappy, we can move you to a different department, maybe reduce some of your responsibilities." But Tom's mind was made up. He spent his evenings researching small-scale farming, watching videos on basic home repairs and making lists of supplies he would need. He sold most of his furniture, keeping only what would work in a farmhouse. His designer suits were replaced by sturdy jeans and work shirts. The inspection revealed problems. As expected, the septic system needed work. Some of the wiring wasn't up to code, and there was minor water damage in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Tom used these issues to negotiate an even lower price, and to his surprise, the seller agreed immediately. The closing process went faster than expected. The seller, eager to be rid of the property, pushed everything through quickly. Tom signed the final papers on a Thursday morning, feeling both terrified and exhilarated as the keys were placed in his hand. "Congratulations," the attorney said. "The Wheeler farm is now yours." That weekend, Tom packed his remaining belongings into a rented truck. His apartment, once his pride and joy, now felt sterile and confining. As he turned in his keys to the building manager, he felt no regret, only impatience to begin his new life. The drive to the farm took longer with the truck, and it was late afternoon when Tom finally turned onto the gravel driveway that now led to his home. The setting sun cast a golden light on the farmhouse, making it look welcoming despite its worn appearance. Tom parked in front of the house and sat for a moment, taking it all in. "Well, here we go," he said to himself as he stepped out of the truck. The air smelled different here, clean with hints of grass and earth. Birds called from the trees, and somewhere in the distance a cow mooed. Tom stood in the yard, keys in hand, feeling a sense of rightness wash over him. Yes, there would be challenges ahead. Yes, he had a lot to learn. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. Tom walked up the porch steps, noticing how one creaked under his weight, another thing to fix. As he put the key in the lock, he couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow, he would begin unloading the truck and setting up his new home. Next week, he would start making repairs. Next month, perhaps he would begin preparing the soil for spring planting. He had plans, dreams, and most importantly, hope. Whatever happened next, Tom knew one thing for certain. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. With a deep breath, he turned the key and pushed open the door to his new life, completely unaware of what or who awaited him inside. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and Tom stepped into what should have been an empty farmhouse. The scent hit him first, not the musty smell of an abandoned building, but something pleasant and homey. "Bread baking?" He sniffed again. "Yes, definitely bread, along with something herbal like tea or soup. Hello?" he called out, confusion replacing his excitement. "Is someone here?" Tom walked slowly through the entrance hall, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Light spilled from what he remembered was the kitchen. During his viewing, that room had been empty and dusty. Now warm yellow light poured from its doorway along with the quiet clinking of dishes. A woman's voice answered, "In the kitchen." Tom froze. He must have the wrong house. But no, this was definitely the Wheeler farm. Same porch with the creaky step, same peeling white paint, same red barn visible from the front windows. Had Diane forgotten to mention caretakers? Maybe the son had hired someone to watch the property. Cautiously, Tom moved toward the kitchen. The door was partially open and he pushed it gently. What he saw made him wonder if he was dreaming. The outdated kitchen he'd viewed weeks ago had transformed. A fire crackled in the old wood stove. Copper pots hung from a rack above a large butcher block island. Dried herbs dangled from the ceiling beams. But most surprising were the three women occupying the space. all turning to stare at him with expressions as shocked as his own must be. Near the stove stood an elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a faded blue apron over a simple dress. At the sink, a middle-aged woman with auburn hair and weathered hands had stopped mid-motion, a dripping plate held forgotten in her grip. And at the table sat a younger woman in her 30s, a book open before her brown hair tucked behind her ears. For several heartbeats, nobody spoke. The elderly woman recovered first. "You must be the new owner," she said calmly, as if finding a stranger in her kitchen was a regular occurrence. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." Yes, I'm Tom Wilson. I just bought this place," Tom stammered. "But who are you? And why are you in my house?" The middle-aged woman set down her plate with a clunk. "Your house?" she said, an edge to her voice. "This has been our home for over 40 years. The elderly woman shot her a warning glance before turning back to Tom with a gentle smile. "I'm Eleanor Wheeler, Henry's sister," she gestured to the others. "This is my daughter Patricia and my granddaughter Lily. We've been living here since my brother took ill." Tom's mind raced. Wheeler, the same last name as the previous owner. But Diane had never mentioned family living on the property. The sale documents had indicated a vacant building. He had the deed in his truck. This was legally his house now. "I don't understand," Tom said, setting his keys on the counter. "The real estate agent never said anything about tenants." "The house was sold to me as vacant property," Patricia snorted. "I bet Roger didn't mention us. Typical." "Roger?" Tom asked. "Henry's son," Eleanor explained. "My nephew. He inherited the farm when Henry passed, but he's never had any interest in it, or us for that matter." Lily closed her book and stood up. Unlike her mother's obvious hostility, her expression was curious. "Did you really buy this place without knowing we were here?" Tom nodded, still trying to process the situation. "The property was listed as vacant. I signed all the papers. I have the keys." He paused, looking around at the obviously lived-in kitchen. "But clearly it's not vacant." Eleanor sighed and pulled out a chair from the table. "You better sit down, Mr. Wilson. We have some things to discuss." Tom sat, feeling like he'd stumbled into someone else's story. Eleanor explained that her brother Henry had owned the farm for 60 years. When his wife died, Eleanor had moved in to help care for him. Patricia and Lily joined them later after Patricia's divorce. "Henry promised we could stay here for as long as we wanted," Eleanor said firmly. "This was his wish. He told us many times, especially after his health started failing." "Was this in his will?" Tom asked. The three women exchanged glances. "Not exactly," Patricia admitted reluctantly. "It was a verbal agreement. Henry meant to update his will, but his mind started to go before he got around to it. By the time he died, he couldn't remember his own name, let alone legal arrangements." Tom ran his hands through his hair. "So Roger inherited everything and he sold it without mentioning you." "That's about the size of it," Eleanor nodded. "We tried to contact him when we heard the place was for sale, but he never returned our calls. The first we knew of the actual sale was when the realtor put up the sold sign last week." Tom felt a headache building. This was not how he'd imagined his first day as a farm owner. "I don't mean to be insensitive, but I sold my apartment. I quit my job. I put everything I have into buying this place. This is supposed to be my home now." "It's our home too," Patricia said sharply. "Has been for decades." An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Tom looked around at the three women. Eleanor's quiet dignity, Patricia's defensive anger, Lily's thoughtful observation. He had no idea what to do. Legally, he knew the house was his. But morally, that felt less clear. "I need some air," he said finally, standing up. "And I need to make some calls." Outside, Tom leaned against his truck and called Diane, the real estate agent. When he explained the situation, her surprise seemed genuine. "3 women living there? I had no idea, Tom, I swear. The son assured us the property was vacant." "Well, it's not," Tom said tersely. "And now I have a big problem." Next, he called the attorney who had handled the closing. The response was disappointing but unsurprising. "Without documentation, any verbal agreement won't hold up legally," the attorney explained. "The deed is in your name. You have every right to ask them to leave. And if they refuse, then you'd have to begin formal eviction proceedings." Tom hung up and stared at the farmhouse. Eviction. The word left a bad taste in his mouth. Yes, he had been deceived, apparently by Roger Wheeler. Not these women. but the thought of forcing an elderly woman and her family from their home made him feel sick. As the sun began to set, Tom noticed Lily walking toward him from the barn. She carried a basket of what looked like fresh eggs. "The chickens still lay well even in winter," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Mom's angry, but she's always been protective. And Gran's worried, but trying not to show it." Tom nodded, unsure what to say. "We don't have anywhere else to go," Lily continued. "Gran's Social Security barely covers her medications. Mom works at the library in town, but it's just part-time. I've been taking online classes trying to finish my degree in agricultural science." She smiled slightly. "Ironic, right? Studying farming while actually living on a farm?" "How have you been managing the property?" Tom asked, genuinely curious. "We do what we can. The vegetable garden keeps us fed most of the year. We sell eggs and honey at the farmer's market in summer. It's not much, but it's home." She paused. "What did you plan to do with the place?" Tom laughed without humor. "Pretty much the same, to be honest. Quit my soul-crushing job in finance to grow vegetables and maybe raise some chickens." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "You should come back inside," Lily said finally. "It's getting cold, and Gran always makes too much stew. We can at least have dinner together while we figure this out." Tom hesitated, then nodded. What else could he do? He couldn't bring himself to kick them out, at least not tonight. And he was hungry. Back in the kitchen, Eleanor was setting the table while Patricia stirred a large pot of stew. The tension was still there, but slightly diminished. "We've set up the guest room for you," Eleanor said, not looking up from her task. "It's the least we can do since you own the place now." The simple statement, delivered without irony, made Tom's heart twist. These women had been betrayed by their own relative, and now they were offering him hospitality in what they still considered their home. As they sat down to eat, Tom realized this was not at all how he had imagined his first meal in his new home. Instead of peaceful solitude, he had unexpected company. Instead of celebrating a fresh start, he was navigating a complex moral dilemma. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that perhaps this unexpected situation was exactly what he needed. A reminder that life rarely follows our carefully laid plans, and that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected circumstances. The question now was, what would he do next? Tom woke early the next morning, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling above him. The events of the previous day came rushing back as he heard movement downstairs. The three women. His farm that wasn't entirely his. The impossible situation. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, following the scent of coffee. In the kitchen, Eleanor stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "Sleep well?" "Well enough," Tom replied, accepting the mug of coffee Patricia silently handed him. "Thank you." An awkward silence filled the room. "What did you say to people whose home you'd accidentally bought?" "I called Roger again last night," Patricia said finally, her voice tight. "Left another message he'll probably ignore." Tom nodded, unsure how to respond. After a moment, he said, "I'm going to drive into town today. I need to speak with the attorney again, face to face." "Won't change anything," Patricia muttered. "Paper's paper. Maybe not," Tom admitted. "But I need to understand exactly where we stand legally." Eleanor brought a plate of pancakes to the table. "Eat first," she said firmly. "Business can wait until after breakfast." The meal passed in uncomfortable silence. Tom couldn't help noticing how efficiently the women moved around each other in the kitchen, a well-practiced dance of long familiarity. This was clearly their home, regardless of what legal documents might say. After breakfast, Tom drove the 20 minutes into Millfield. The small town consisted of one main street with shops, a post office, and a small brick building that housed various professional offices, including the law firm that had handled his purchase. Attorney Michael Benson seemed genuinely troubled by the situation. "I've known the Wheeler family for years," he admitted, shuffling through Tom's file. "Had no idea Eleanor and her family were still living there. Roger assured us the property was vacant." "Well, it's not," Tom said, the frustration evident in his voice. "And now I've got three women who have nowhere else to go, and I've sunk everything I have into this place." Benson sighed. "Legally, the situation is clear. You purchased the property in good faith. The deed is in your name. You have every right to possession." "And morally?" Tom asked. Benson removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. That's beyond my professional scope, Mr. Wilson. As Tom left the attorney's office, he noticed the town library across the street. Patricia had mentioned working there. On impulse, he crossed the street and went inside. The library was small but welcoming, with worn wooden floors and tall windows that let in streams of natural light. At the circulation desk, a middle-aged woman with glasses looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for information about local history," Tom said. "Specifically about the Wheeler farm." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Wheeler farm? Any particular reason?" "I just bought it," Tom said simply. The woman's expression changed immediately. "You're Tom Wilson," she said, not a question. "Patricia called this morning. Said she wouldn't be in today." She extended her hand. "I'm Beth, the head librarian." Tom shook her hand, not surprised that news traveled fast in a small town. "Nice to meet you. So about that local history?" Beth led him to a section of shelves labeled Local History and Records. "The Wheeler farm has been in that family for generations," she explained, pulling out a large book. "This is a history of Millfield written in the 1980s, has a whole section on the older farms in the area." Tom thanked her and settled at a nearby table with the book and several others Beth had suggested. For the next few hours, he immersed himself in the history of his new property. The Wheeler farm, he learned, had been established in 1892 by Henry Wheeler's grandfather. It had once been much larger, nearly 100 acres, but parcels had been sold off over the years during hard times. The book included a black-and-white photograph of the farmhouse from the 1950s, looking much the same as it did now, though in better repair. Another book, a collection of newspaper articles about local agriculture, mentioned Henry Wheeler several times. He had been known for his apple orchard and had won prizes at the county fair for his cider. One article from the 1970s featured a photograph of a much younger Eleanor standing beside her brother, both smiling proudly in front of a display of preserves and baked goods. "Find what you're looking for?" Beth asked, approaching his table. "Maybe," Tom said, showing her the photograph. "How long has Patricia worked here?" "Going on 15 years now," Beth replied. "She's good with the patrons, especially the kids. Runs our story hour on Saturdays." She hesitated, then added, "Those women have been through a lot. Henry's illness was hard on all of them. Eleanor never left his side even when he couldn't remember who she was." Tom nodded, thinking, "Do you know Roger? Henry's son?" Beth's expression hardened slightly. "He left town right after high school. Barely came back even when his father was dying. Some people just don't care about their roots." Tom spent another hour at the library before thanking Beth and heading out. His next stop was the town hall, where he examined property records and tax documents. Everything confirmed what he already knew. The farm had legally passed to Roger Wheeler upon Henry's death, and Roger had sold it to him. But he also found something interesting, evidence that Eleanor had indeed lived on the property for decades. Her name appeared on utility bills going back 30 years. There were permits for repairs and improvements with both Henry's and Eleanor's names on them. By late afternoon, Tom was hungry and mentally exhausted. He stopped at a small diner on Main Street for a late lunch. As he waited for his food, he overheard two older men at the next table. "Heard the Wheeler place finally sold," one said. "About time," the other replied. "Shame about Eleanor and her girls, though. Where they gonna go?" Roger never did right by them. Remember how Eleanor nursed Henry for years? Her own brother wasting away like that? And that garden of hers. Best tomatoes in the county. Remember when they used to sell at the farmer's market? Lily was just knee-high then, helping her grandmother bag produce. Tom ate his lunch slowly, listening to the snippets of conversation around him. By the time he finished, he felt like he'd gained a better understanding of the situation, but was no closer to a solution. On the drive back to the farm, Tom called the real estate agent again. "I need Roger Wheeler's contact information," he said without preamble. "I can't give out client information," Diane replied, sounding uncomfortable. "Diane, he sold me a property with 3 residents he forgot to mention. I think that warrants a conversation." There was a long pause before Diane sighed. "I'll text you his number, but I never gave it to you, understood?" When Tom arrived back at the farm, he found Lily in the barn, tending to the chickens. She looked up as he entered. "Mom's mad at you," she said bluntly. "Thinks you went to town to start eviction proceedings." I didn't, Tom replied, watching as she scattered feed for the hens. I went to learn more about the farm. And your family? Lily straightened up, brushing dust from her jeans. Find anything interesting? A lot, actually. Your grandmother and grandfather were pretty well known around here. Prize-winning cider, best tomatoes in the county. A small smile touched Lily's lips. Grand's tomatoes are still the best. She has a way with plants. Says they talk to her. They walked together from the barn toward the house. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, and Tom noticed details he'd missed the day before. An herb garden near the kitchen door, carefully tended despite the winter weather. A handmade birdhouse hanging from a nearby tree, a weathered bench positioned to catch the morning sun. What will you do? Lily asked suddenly, stopping before they reached the house. About us, I mean. Tom looked at her, seeing the worry behind her careful expression. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I'm not going to throw you out. We'll figure something out. Inside, Eleanor was at the kitchen table mending a shirt with tiny, precise stitches. Patricia sat nearby, tension evident in the set of her shoulders. How was town? Eleanor asked mildly, not looking up from her work. Educational, Tom replied. He took a deep breath. I have Roger's phone number. I'm going to call him. Patricia's head snapped up. What good will that do? He's made it clear he doesn't care about us. Maybe, Tom agreed. But I think he and I need to have a conversation about exactly what he knew when he sold me this place. Eleanor set down her mending and looked directly at Tom for the first time that day. Whatever Roger says, Henry's wish was for us to stay here. That's the truth, legal or not, Tom nodded. I believe you. And I promise, whatever happens next, we'll face it together. As he said the words, Tom realized he meant them. Somehow, in just 2 days, his understanding of what he'd purchased had fundamentally changed. He hadn't just bought a farm. He'd stepped into a story that had been unfolding for generations. And now, for better or worse, he was part of it. Tom sat on the porch steps, phone in hand, watching the sun set over his new property. The golden light bathed the fields in warmth, highlighting the beauty that had drawn him here in the first place. After 3 attempts, he'd finally connected with Roger Wheeler, and their conversation had left him with a mixture of anger and sadness. Look, I didn't think it mattered, Roger had said, his voice casual, as if they were discussing something trivial. They're squatters, technically. No legal right to be there. They're your family, Tom had replied, struggling to keep his voice level. Aunt Eleanor made her choice years ago when she moved in with Dad. Not my problem. She didn't plan for the future. When Tom mentioned Henry's promise that the women could stay, Roger had laughed. Dad said a lot of things, especially after his mind started going. Unless it's in writing, it doesn't count. The conversation had ended abruptly when Roger said, You've got the deed. Do what you want. I'm done with that place and everything in it. Now, as darkness fell, Tom tried to make sense of a man who could so easily dismiss his own blood. How could anyone sell a property out from under elderly relatives without a second thought? The screen door creaked open behind him, and Eleanor stepped out, wrapping a worn cardigan around her shoulders against the evening chill. Mind if I join you? She asked. Tom moved over, making room on the step. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I spoke with Roger, Tom said finally. Eleanor nodded, as if she'd expected this. And? He confirmed what you said. He knew you were living here when he sold the place. Eleanor sighed, a soft sound almost lost in the evening breeze. Roger was always angry. Even as a boy. Angry at Henry for being strict. Angry at his mother for dying young. Angry at me for trying to step in. She looked at Tom, her eyes reflecting the fading light. Did he mention the money? Tom frowned. What money? Henry left a small insurance policy. Enough to fix the roof, maybe update the kitchen. Roger got that too. Tom felt his anger rising again. He never said a word about it. No, I don't suppose he would. Eleanor gazed out at the fields. This land has been in our family for generations. My grandfather planted those apple trees at the north end. My father built that barn with his own hands after the old one burned down. Henry and I played in that creek as children. She paused. It's more than just land, Mr. Wilson. It's our history. The next morning, Tom woke to the sound of rain pounding on the roof. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, surprised to find only Lily in the kitchen. Mom and Gran went into town, she explained, pouring him coffee. Grocery day. We're running low on supplies. Tom nodded, glancing out the window at the steadily falling rain. Bad day for it. We've seen worse. Lily sat across from him, cradling her own mug. Gran says you talked to Roger. I did. And? Tom met her gaze directly. He knew you were here. Sold the place anyway. Lily's expression hardened momentarily, then relaxed into resignation. Sounds like Roger. She took a sip of her coffee. So what happens now? Before Tom could answer, a sharp crack of thunder shook the house, followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. The greenhouse. Lily jumped up, rushing to the back door. Tom followed her into the rain. Behind the house stood a small greenhouse where a tree branch had crashed through the glass roof. Rain poured in through the gaping hole, soaking the plants below. We need to cover this, Lily shouted over the storm. There's plywood in the barn. For the next hour, Tom and Lily worked together in the driving rain, securing a temporary cover over the damaged greenhouse. Tom's city clothes were soaked through, mud caking his shoes, but he found himself energized by the physical work and the urgency of the task. When they finally retreated to the kitchen, dripping water onto the worn linoleum, Lily looked at him with new respect. Thanks for helping, she said, handing him a towel. Most of Gran's seedlings would have been ruined. Seedlings? In winter? Lily nodded. Gran starts them early in the greenhouse. By spring, they're ready to transplant. That's how we get the first tomatoes to market, while everyone else is just seeing flowers on their plants. Tom toweled his hair dry, thinking, how big is your garden operation? About 2 acres, all told. Vegetables mostly, plus the apple orchard. Used to be bigger when Grandpa was alive. We've been scaling back each year as Gran gets older and we have less help. As they talked, Tom began to realize just how much work the 3 women put into maintaining the farm. They weren't just living in the house, they were actively farming the land, preserving a legacy of agricultural knowledge passed down through generations. When Patricia and Eleanor returned from town, they found Tom and Lily at the kitchen table. Surrounded by papers, what's all this? Patricia asked, setting down grocery bags. Farm plans, Lily explained. I was showing Tom our growing rotation and market schedule. Patricia shot Tom a suspicious look but said nothing. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Each morning, Tom would help with chores, feeding chickens, checking fences, clearing fallen branches after the storm. The women, initially wary, gradually accepted his assistance. In the afternoons, he explored the property, making notes about repairs needed and improvements possible. In the old barn, he discovered carefully preserved farm equipment, some antique, some still functional. In a dusty corner, he found stacks of ledgers, Henry's meticulous farm records dating back decades. One evening, as Patricia sorted through seed packets at the kitchen table, Tom approached her with one of the ledgers. I've been looking at the farm's financial history, he said carefully. You've been running this place on a shoestring budget. Patricia's shoulders tensed. We manage, I can see that. But I'm also seeing potential that's going untapped. She looked up at him, eyes narrowed. Meaning? The apple orchard alone could produce twice as much with proper pruning. The south field has excellent soil for berries, and this, he pointed to a notation in the ledger, shows the farm used to produce honey. Do you still keep bees? The hives are empty now, Patricia admitted. None of us knew how to properly maintain them after the last colony died out. Tom nodded, turning more pages in the ledger. Henry was a good record keeper. There's a wealth of information here. What's your point? Patricia asked, her voice less hostile than it had been days before. My point is this farm has potential. Real potential. Not just as a place to live, but as a working farm that could support all of us. Patricia stared at him. All of us? Before Tom could respond, the back door banged open and Lily rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. You need to see this, she said, gesturing for them to follow. She led them to the old apple orchard, where Eleanor stood beside a tree smiling broadly. Look, the older woman said, pointing to a small, newly constructed box attached to the tree trunk. Our first bluebird house has occupants already. Tom watched as a small bluebird darted into the opening, then back out again, busy with nest building. Bluebirds are good luck, Eleanor said, her eyes twinkling, and excellent for pest control in the orchard. Their presence means the ecosystem is healthy. As they walked back to the house, Eleanor's hand rested lightly on Tom's arm. You've been studying Henry's ledgers, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Tom admitted. I hope you don't mind. Mind. Those records are part of this farm's story. They should be studied. She paused. You're seeing what this place could be again, aren't you? Tom nodded. It has so much potential. It always did, Eleanor agreed. But potential needs more than just vision. It needs hands to work and hearts to care. That night, unable to sleep, Tom sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, sketching out ideas. The more he learned about the farm, the more he understood what a special place it was, and what it could become again with the right investment and care. But the central problem remained. Legally, the farm was his, but morally, it belonged to these women whose lives were deeply intertwined with every acre. As dawn broke, Tom looked out the window at the farm awakening. Chickens pecking in the yard, dew glistening on the fields, smoke curling from the chimney of the house that was both his and not his. In that moment of quiet clarity, he finally saw a path forward that might work for everyone. The question was, would the Wheeler women agree to his proposal? The kitchen table had seen decades of family discussions, holiday meals, and late-night conversations. Now it served as the meeting place for what might be the most important discussion in the farm's recent history. Tom had asked all three women to gather after breakfast, his legal pad filled with notes sitting before him. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Tom began, his voice steady despite his nerves. About the farm, about your situation, about my options. Patricia's expression remained guarded while Eleanor watched him with calm curiosity. Lily leaned forward slightly, her eyes showing cautious hope. The way I see it, we have three options, Tom continued. First, I could exercise my legal rights and ask you to leave. He held up his hand as Patricia opened her mouth to object. I'm not going to do that. It wouldn't be right. Second, I could sell the farm and try to recoup my investment. But real estate transactions take time, and there's no guarantee I'd find a buyer who would pay what I need. And the third option? Eleanor asked quietly. Tom took a deep breath. We work together. Make this place what it could be. A functioning, profitable small farm. Silence fell over the kitchen. Outside, a rooster crowed, punctuating the moment. What exactly are you proposing? Patricia finally asked, her voice careful, measured. Tom opened his notebook. I've been studying Henry's records, walking the property, and thinking about what I learned in town. This farm has potential, real potential. The orchard could produce twice as much with proper care. The fields could grow a wider variety of crops. The honey operation could be restarted. He turned to a page of calculations. I've run the numbers. With some investment and hard work, this farm could support all of us. Investment? Lily asked. We don't have money for that. I do, Tom said simply. Or at least enough to get started. I had savings set aside for renovations. We could use that for farm improvements instead. Patricia crossed her arms. And what would this arrangement look like? Who would own what? Tom had anticipated this question. Legally, I'd remain the owner of the property, but I'd draw up a contract giving you lifetime rights to live here. He looked at Eleanor, just as Henry promised. And in return? Patricia pressed. In return, we'd be partners in the farm business. We'd share the work, share the decisions, and share the profits. Tom slid a paper across the table. I've sketched out how it might work. For the next hour, they discussed details. Tom proposed converting part of the barn into a farm store where they could sell produce, preserves, and honey directly to customers. Eleanor's eyes lit up at the mention of expanding her heirloom vegetable garden. Lily spoke enthusiastically about sustainable farming practices she'd been studying. Only Patricia remained skeptical. This all sounds nice on paper, she said, but farming is hard work. No offense, but you're a city guy with no experience. You're right, Tom admitted. I don't know much about farming, but I do know about business, marketing, and finances, and I'm willing to learn the rest. He looked Patricia in the eye. I need your knowledge. All of you. I can't do this alone. Eleanor placed her weathered hand on top of Tom's. Henry would have liked this plan, she said softly. He always said this land needed young hands to keep it going. Patricia sighed, looking around the kitchen, at her mother, her daughter, at the home she'd thought they would lose. We'd need everything in writing. Legal, binding documents. Absolutely, Tom agreed. I'll have the attorney draw up proper papers. And if it doesn't work out? Patricia asked. If we can't make enough to sustain the farm? Then we'll figure something else out, Tom said firmly. Together. But I believe we can make this work. Lily, who had been quiet for several minutes, suddenly spoke up. The northeast field. The one that's been fallow for years. I've been researching lavender cultivation. It's drought-resistant, attracts pollinators for the orchard, and could add another product line: dried lavender, essential oils, soaps. Tom grinned. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. By lunchtime, a tentative agreement had been reached. They would try Tom's partnership plan, with proper legal protections for everyone involved. The following weeks brought changes to the Wheeler farm. Tom moved his belongings from the guest room to the small caretaker's cottage behind the house, giving the women their privacy while keeping him close to the daily operations. His city clothes were gradually replaced by more practical farm wear, his once soft hands developing calluses from daily work. The attorney drew up detailed documents ensuring Eleanor, Patricia, and Lily had lifetime rights to live in the farmhouse, while establishing a business partnership for the farm operations. When all parties signed, there was a palpable sense of relief in the room. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it new possibilities. Tom used his savings to repair the greenhouse properly, fix the leaking barn roof, and purchase seeds and supplies for the expanded garden. Eleanor taught him how to start seedlings, her patient instruction making up for his initial clumsiness. Patricia gradually warmed to the arrangement, especially after Tom's business expertise helped them secure a stall at 3 local farmers' markets instead of just one. Her organizational skills proved invaluable as they planned the growing season, her practical nature balancing Tom's sometimes overambitious ideas. Lily's lavender field was planted with Tom working alongside her, both of them researching proper techniques and soil amendments. Their shared enthusiasm for sustainable farming methods created a bond between them that grew stronger with each passing day. One warm afternoon in late spring, Tom stood at the edge of the apple orchard, watching honeybees dart among the blossoms. He'd helped Eleanor's friend from town install 3 new hives, the start of rebuilding the farm's honey production. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice behind him. Tom turned to see Lily approaching, carrying 2 glasses of Eleanor's homemade lemonade. "Just thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined 3 months ago," Tom replied, accepting a glass gratefully. Lily nodded. "When you showed up that day, I thought for sure we'd be homeless within a week. And I thought I'd be living here alone, figuring out farming by watching YouTube videos." Tom chuckled. They stood in comfortable silence watching the bees work. In the distance, Eleanor and Patricia were planting the last row of tomatoes, their movements in perfect sync after years of working together. "We're placing an order for the farm store shelving tomorrow," Lily said. "Mom found a local carpenter who'll give us a good price if we help with the installation." Tom nodded. "The permit for the store came through yesterday. We can start renovating the barn next week." "It's really happening, isn't it?" Lily said, a note of wonder in her voice. "It really is," Tom agreed. Later that evening, as the sun set over the fields, the 4 of them sat on the porch, tired but satisfied after a long day's work. Eleanor had made her special apple pie, served with the first strawberries of the season. "I've been thinking," Eleanor said between bites, "this farm needs a new name. Wheeler Farm doesn't quite fit anymore. What did you have in mind?" Tom asked. Eleanor smiled. "How about 4 Corners Farm? For the 4 of us who are bringing it back to life." Tom looked around at these 3 women who had gone from strangers to partners to something like family in just a few months. He thought about the unlikely chain of events that had brought him here. A city man burning out at a desk job, stumbling across a farm listing, making an impulsive decision that changed everything. 4 Corners Farm, he repeated, testing the name. "I like it." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Tom realized something profound. In trying to create a new life for himself, he'd stumbled into something far richer than he could have imagined. Not just a place to live or work, but a community, a purpose, a sense of belonging. The farm had never been just about the land or the house. It was about the people who poured their hearts into it, generation after generation. Now he was part of that ongoing story, an unexpected chapter in a tale that had been unfolding for over a century. And as he sat there on the porch with Eleanor, Patricia, and Lily, Tom knew that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings.